And good morning, everybody. Welcome in to another edition of the Pass and Have Sports Show. I'm your host, James Scorza, with you, and with me, as always, is a group of companions on this very important overcast Saturday morning. Joey Marks and Joe Sullivan from Devereaux Sports joins us once again. Gentlemen, what's going on with you guys? How happy Saturday to you?
Good morning, Philadelphia, and we are great here in Philadelphia because we're still Super Bowl champs, and we're going to get into a lot of the offseason moves, some of the spring training because we're upcoming on the Philadelphia Phillies season, and we say goodbye to the miserable team that was the Philadelphia 76ers and say au revoir to the Flyers season upcoming in the next couple weeks. But I
Yeah,
want to first welcome in our good friend. It's good to have him back in the family. It's good to have him back in the fold. And it's great to have him back on the show. Joe Sullivan from the Old School Sports Podcast. How are you doing,
nice.
Joe?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'm doing great, and thanks for having me, man. It's good. It's good to come on and chop it up with you guys, man. Lot going on in Philly sports. Like what I mean. At least we. I mean, hey, we got a Super Bowl football team.
Yep.
Our basketball team and our hockey team may both blow right now, but hey, we got a Super Bowl football team and we got a baseball team that can contend. So I'm excited.
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely. And before we go into our Shapiro of the day, we got a comment here. Our good friend Mitch Kofsky, the Dom himself, and also Boss Man, checks in. Good morning, guys, and checking in. Just every week, check out Mitch Kofsky's podcast, Fly Like an Eagle, on Fridays afternoon at 4 o'clock, talking all things birds off season. But Joe, there's a
And
lot to get. What's that?
and big announcement, James.
Yes.
Mitch, as a humble person as he is, uh, m- he's got a new show coming on
Hmm.
Hardcore Sports Network this morning. Check it out right after our show at 10:30 a.m. Weekend wake up sports talk with Mitch
Ooh,
Kopsky. Check
nice.
it out right after this show. Stay tuned on Hardcore Sports Network YouTube channel. Subscribe and like wherever you're watching us, and stay tuned right after our show because Mitch is going to take you into the rest of the morning.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. So check out with that, and also congrats on the new gig, Mitch. I mean, the
Yep.
busy man keeps on getting busy, man. That's all good
Yep.
with that. But Joe, we got a lot to get to on this busy Saturday. So simply put, where do we begin?
Well, we begin with the Eagles. We talked about it with the Super Bowl champions, and just like any champion, uh, things get lost. Like you lose coaches. We lost Kellen Moore. We lost, our one of our coordinators. You lose people when you're that good. You lose people, and this defense got completely depleted. But unlike 2017 and 2018, where I will remind people that Super Bowl championship, within 2 years after that Super Bowl championship, that whole defense that got that championship was completely gone.
Hmm.
From Bo Allen to Hargrave to Vinnie Curry to Bradham to
Chris Long.
Jalen Mills to list goes on and on. Everybody was gone in 2 years. And how we had to figure out how to you know, redress a new defense from scratch, along with having to, cut and take a huge cap hit, cap penalty on cutting or trading Carson Wentz.
Hmm.
Like that's the difference. People want to sit here and worry about how his season taking a spiraling effect right now because of how many people he's let walk out the door. Well, I start with this. Joe, my first question to you is what are your feelings about how all of the guys that have left this defense have left this team in the last week? What are your feelings about it?
Well, I mean, I hate it, obviously, but unfortunately, it's a reality of today's NFL and a salary cap world. I mean, you know, do I like Milton Williams as a player? Yeah, of course I do. But you can't pay him $26 million a year when you have Jalen Carter coming up in a year. Next year you're probably going to have to pay Jalen Carter maybe upwards of $40 million a year, right? Mm-hmm. Then you got Nolan Smith. You have the center, Mac Jurgens is up for a deal. To a lesser degree, you got Reed Blankenship. And then a couple years after that, you got Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. And I didn't even mention Nakobe Dean. Nakobe Dean's up at the end of this year. So, the bottom line is, does it suck to have to lose these guys? Yeah, but I heard on WIP they were saying a possible reset year. I don't necessarily agree with that, because if you look at this Eagles roster, even with losing these guys, they're still a top 5 talented team in the National Football League. And, and I kind of like what Howie's doing. I mean, the last 4 years they've drafted extremely well. And if the Eagles are going to have continued success, it's going to come down to the draft. Howie has to keep hitting on these picks. And Adam Schefter pointed out the other day, the Eagles are going to have 20 picks in the next 2 rounds. I think including 11 in the first 4. So that's what good football teams do. If you want to have sustained success like New England and Kansas City, you're going to have to lose guys like Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, but then you got to replace them, you got to hit on some of these 1-year contracts, the Uche or whatever. He didn't do shit in Kansas City, but you got to hope a guy like that comes in hungry on a 1-year deal, and produces. And, it's like I said, it's just a reality of today's game. I mean, there's nothing we could do about it.
James, how do you feel about some of the losses on the defense that we've had to deal with the last week?
Yeah, it's interesting. Before I get into my point here, Bobby Murphy checks in and says, "What's going on?" Says, "What's up, guys?" Good morning, Bobby. Thanks for chiming in. Actually, there's actually a little bit of breaking news. I didn't see this until this morning, but Mekhi Becton on the move. He's heading to the Chargers on a 2-year, $20 million deal to the Chargers, which I didn't expect to hear that this morning. But to my point, though, and even to allude to Joey's point too about how he's basically off season. I mean, this is something that I never thought I would say, but it is interesting to think. I mean, obviously, people are complaining about, Howie Roseman's letting all these players go and X, Y, and Z, and the list goes on and on about that too. But I mean, the difference is that I would rather be different than I'd rather be the same, because if you keep the same cohesiveness, if you had for the last couple years, like you mentioned, in that 2017, 2018, 2019 seasons, and they try to run it back again and again and again. And then obviously the team was old at that time, but obviously this is probably the best time to look at it. And I mean, the guy that we traded for CJ Gardner-Johnson could be one guy to be probably will be one guy that if he will try to turn into Mekhi Becton, kind of like Stellan University always has been. It'll be interesting to see what he'll look like, and even what Tyler Steen will look like, especially this will probably be his position now to lose now, depending on his situation too, about that too. But yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting offseason, but I'm not going to be one guy that's going to be saying fire Howie after getting rid of all these players, because I'd rather it be different than rather be the same.
I mean, here's my takeaway, and there's been, Joe brought up one of the names that I'm going to bring up. A couple of the things that are different from this time around than from 2017 is that in 2017, we had a lot of mercenaries. We had a lot of veterans. We did not have a lot of young talent that was coming up the pipeline. And we do here now. That, I think that's the part of all of this that I think Howie's learned from, is that, nurture your talent and reward your vets. Saquon Barkley, you could say what you want to say about, well, why are you going to extend this contract? Because potentially with that extension, especially when you think about the life cycle of a running back, you basically are signing Saquon Barkley to end his career potentially with the Philadelphia Eagles.
For sure.
And that is something to be said, to hold on to a caliber of a running back like that for the remainder of his career. That says a lot as far as an Eagles organization turning the page, because that's never happened since Brian Westbrook. So that's one thing. The other thing is, and it's not been talked about, widely talked about, and I'm a little irritated because I feel like this guy gets a lot of disrespect, and I feel like, well, I feel like both these players get a lot of disrespect, and I feel like they don't merit it all the time. That is Jordan Davis. Jordan Davis has been lost in the sauce here. Milton Williams goes out, Jordan Davis goes in. You got Jaden Carter and Jordan Davis side by side with each other. Then Nolan Smith. 3 out of the 4 people on that defensive line are former Georgia Bulldogs that played with each other at Georgia.
Mhm.
That's not anything to sneeze at. These guys dominated the SEC
Yeah.
defensively. So I get the SEC and the NFL are apples and oranges, but if there's going to be any way to kind of convince me that things are going to work out, it's that you're going to put a talented defensive line like that. And you don't think Jordan Davis, knowing that he's going to have a contract coming up, isn't going to play his ass off? Again, especially with his brothers on that defensive line.
Mhm.
It's all in the family, dude. And I go back to one more person, and Joe brought him up. People forget that Nakobe Dean, it was a big captain in this team this season. He had the green dot. He was the play caller. He worked in tandem with Zach Bond. He's coming back next year. It may not be right at the beginning of the year, but he's coming back next year. And you don't think he has something more to prove? This is a guy that, let's not forget, this is a guy that got disrespected by 31 other teams and was taken in the 3rd round as a seemingly health risk. And let's be honest, has he had health issues? Sure. But this guy has been outstanding when called upon. And the guy has taken on a lot of responsibility. I go to another person, not quite disrespected, but will be thrusted into a big responsibility, and that's Keely Ringo. Keely Ringo, in my mind, is a big defensive back that is strong. All you have to do is put him in the right position. And I think Vic Fangio will do that. I think these kids are ready. Now, my next question, Joe, to you is, which one of these youngsters do you think is going to step up? These core youngsters that we retain. Which one of these guys do you think is going to step up to next season?
Well, you know what? I'm going to bring up a guy that actually that you didn't mention, Moro Jamo, because if you look at him, Milton Williams obviously is a loss. I mean, Milton Williams had 6 sacks last year, but in the playoffs, Ajamo got a lot of snaps. In fact, including the Super Bowl, he showed out in the Super Bowl a little bit, and Ajamo actually, like, I've never looked at this stat before, but I saw it. Elliot Short Parks had put it on X. He was 2nd in the NFL in pass rush win rate at like 18.7%. So he was right up there with Milton Williams when it comes to win rate. So obviously Ajamo, I think, is going to play a big role. That kid's hungry. You mentioned Jordan Davis. Jordan Davis was interviewed, I think, last week. He said he's already like on the Peloton. He's trying to shed some weight because Jordan Davis is good against the run, but his pass rush leaves a little bit to be desired. But he did have a nice sack against Washington in the championship game, so maybe he can improve there. And you mentioned Ringo. I mean, it's probably going to be Ringo's job to lose, but I do like that they brought Adoree Jackson in as vet competition. Like, not that Adoree Jackson is great, but at least if Ringo can handle the job, or maybe he gets a little handsy, because he can be handsy as far as getting penalties and stuff. Yeah. So but yeah, to answer your question, Ojamu and I think Ringo are two of the most important.
Now, James, these are guys. Your Bulldogs are now the prime of this nucleus of this defense. This is now the official Bull Eagles, as basically Frank Finnegan coined.
Right.
My question to you is the same thing. Which one of these youngsters shows out, it comes out and becomes a star next season.
Yeah, it's interesting, Joe, because if you think about it, I mean, there's a lot of good pieces on this team that I can't like. Obviously, if I gotta pick and choose, obviously, but there's a couple comments here before I go one step further here. Bobby again checks in. It says Trot Jr. So that's a good that's a very good one. He also talked about earlier that we have several options on the offensive, the right guard position with Trevor Keegan and also Tyler Steen and even the guy we got in Kenyon Green. But the thing, the one that stands out to me, I think if I have to pick one in a blender, I gotta go with Kiwi Ringo. I mean, maybe just one guy because, of course, I gotta pick the Bulldog, right? It's like it never
Well,
fails.
that's what I thought.
That's what you thought, right? But no, yeah. I mean, I like to see what he has in store now because obviously Isaiah Rodgers isn't here anymore. And that slot position would obviously what Cooper and also what Quinyon are going to be. They're going to be like the 1 and 2, obviously. But for me, the third position is that that's going to be up to who. Maybe it's going to be like either. I mean, I wouldn't say Avonte Maddox because I think he's been like around for a long time, depending on if he comes back or whatnot. But yeah, I gotta either go with Kiwi Ringo or go like what Bobby said with Trot Jr. And I'm actually going to be anxious to see what they're both going to look like come preseason when the time calls for it.
You know, I got to admit, like, so with Trot Jr., it makes me intrigued because he comes from a good pedigree. We already know that, but the thing about Trot Jr. that makes me more intrigued is he's versatile.
Right.
You know, you could not put Axeman down in the 4 position. You could not put him down in the DN position and expect him to thrive. His son can play both standing up and kind of in the 3 position and 4 position. So I feel like this is a guy that the Vic Fangio, if he really wants to get him involved, can utilize him as kind of a Swiss Army knife. And I think Trot Jr. is a capable body and a capable talent to kind of take the next steps forward. And look, I honestly think that Trot Jr. has a lot of potential for what he wants to accomplish, especially on this defense, and given some of the talent around him. Look, Jalen Carter, Joe brought it up earlier, is that Jalen Carter is going to demand a lot of money. Not that he hasn't earned it or doesn't deserve it. This is a guy that's proven that he's a game wrecker. But within being a game wrecker at that position, it opens up other people to thrive. Guys like Zach Bond, guys like a Milton Williams. Someone said it on WIP, and I completely agree. Milton Williams ought to give Jalen Carter half his salary for what he got, because if it wasn't for Jalen Carter, Milton Williams wouldn't have gotten that money. And the same with Josh Sweat. Like, the idea that Jalen Carter should be getting kickbacks from both those players, because if you don't have Jalen Carter on that defensive line, Milton Williams doesn't get in as seamlessly as he did. Josh Sweat doesn't get in on Patrick Mahomes quite as much as he did in the Super Bowl. Jalen Carter is the guy that takes on 2 blockers and makes life easier for everyone else.
Yeah, and Bobby alludes here. It says they also got a 3rd rounder in Byron Young that came off the waivers of the 49ers from last season. So that's also good too. But let me say this about this too, Joe. That's a very good point by you, because you think about what this team is, obviously. I thought about this during the week, and I talked about it with my dad about this too. Do you think the reason why like Josh Sweat and Mel Williams had like the season they had was because they thought that they knew they were gonna get paid, and thinking like, okay, now since I got paid, like you think they're gonna like drop off a little bit? Because I don't know because you think about it, Josh Sweat was a very, very good player, but the difference was he wasn't consistent enough. It's the same thing with Milton. Mel Williams was a good player too. Thank you for the Super Bowl and all that, and et cetera, et cetera. But I think the reason why that they really made a good jump this year is because they knew that at the end of the season that they're going to get paid somewhere, either it was going to be here or somewhere else. But the thing I took out of it too is that, okay, now since they got paid with like Bill Williams with the Patriots and Josh Sweat with the Cardinals, now I'm thinking like, okay, do they still have that level of consistency? But I don't know. I mean, that's going to be a little bit on the fence. But I mean, if they play well, that's great. I mean, but then again, I mean, who knows? I mean, I would.
Here's the thing, and Joe, maybe you can chime in too on this, is that when you have a guy like Jalen Carter, I look at like other defensive tackles that have been like that, game records in the league, Warren Sapp, Aaron Donald, people like that, like the idea like a Vince Wilfork, like these guys like allow their other guys around them and they sacrifice some of their stats. They don't bitch and moan about, oh, I didn't get in, so I guess I'm not, like you guys aren't going to pay me because of X, Y, and Z. No, they they take on two blockers so they can let their teammates eat, and like that's the difference. For me. No, okay. In 2023, me and you, James, have had conversations that Josh Sweat was on the back of a milk carton for a lot of that season. Milton Williams, if it wasn't for Fletcher Cox retiring and Jordan Davis struggling with his weight and his stamina, wouldn't be playing quite as often as he was last year. These two guys are the product of their environment, product of their coaching, product of the players around them, product of the talent around them. I think when you see them go to Arizona, where Josh Sweat's not going to have a Jalen Carter next to him, he's going to have to work.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to have a lot of issues with sustaining the kind of success, the level of success. You're not going to the Super Bowl if you're with the Cardinals. I'm sorry, you're just not.
No.
If you're with the New England Patriots, you're not going to the Super Bowl anytime soon.
Yeah.
Sorry, Milton Williams, you're just not. So you take your ring, you take your bag, and you go away. But the guys that are taking the place, and then a Jamo, a Jordan Davis, a Nolan Smith, God forbid, a Bryce Huff or someone else. The idea that these guys can feast and eat will prove that Jalen Carter is the linchpin to what success these other interchangeable parts will have. Joe, I will ask, like, do you think that despite some of these interchangeable parts, part of these interchangeable parts are going to be what Howie brings in the draft? You brought up earlier 11 picks in the next 2 years,
right?
First 4 rounds. That's a lot of quality talent right there that you could possibly hit on. Do you see, like, out of what Howie has done in the last couple of years? Do you see, and what I'm saying about Jalen Carter? Do you see Howie being able to put an interchangeable part where Josh Sweat was, where Milton Williams was, to replenish this defense?
Well, I certainly hope so. I mean, this. I'll tell you, if you are going to lose a guy like Milton Williams, this is the year to do it because this draft is very deep in interior defensive line. Mm-hmm. So there's a very good chance that they're sitting at 32, or even if the Eagles wanted to trade up a few. And that's the other thing too. We're sitting at 32 with all these picks. For the Philadelphia Eagles don't need to select 20 players. So like the Eagles can use these picks to either, move up and down the board, or possibly like a few years ago. Remember when we got CJ Gardner-Johnson the first time? He traded a pick, Howie brought it up to people that it's going to be a long offseason. Mm-hmm. So like, this football team, he has until opening week really to get this roster straight. So that, we could be sitting there in August. He may make a trade for a young guy that's not going to be signed. Then he brings him in here, use a pick for that. But so I'm hoping that he can. But I get what you're saying about Milton Williams and Josh Sweat. Now I do think Josh Sweat going to Arizona may struggle because he doesn't have a lot to work with. But I don't want to minimize though. Like Milton Williams is a good football player, and I think with him going to New England, he actually in New England he has some things to work. Like he may put up numbers in New England because they have Christian Barrymore that he's playing next, who's a good football player, and they also just signed Harold Landry. So we Sweat may not put up the numbers, but Eagles fans shouldn't get too upset if Milton Williams puts up good numbers because he is playing with good players in New England too. You know what I'm saying? But
yeah, I think that I'm not trying to disrespect either of their talents.
Right? No, I got you. I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying like I guess it's one of those things. It's not you. Like I'm not saying you are, but I know they're like listen to the radio this week. Like there were a couple people calling up and they're like, Milton Williams, we'll be fine. Like I think we'll be fine, and I understand why. We had to let these guys go, but like let's not get it twisted. We were the number one defense in the league. Like there's a good bet we may slide down to maybe say 9 to 12. But guess what? With all the talent the Eagles have, especially on offense, we can still win a Super Bowl being the 9th to 10th to 11th best defense because, we could still find a way to win football games. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And let's keep something in mind. Let's not lose perspective that just a year ago we lost Fletcher Cox. So the idea that we went – being able to replace a good talent in the interior defensive line isn't something new.
Right.
Like we had to replace Fletcher Cox. We did that with Milton Williams and maybe with Jordan Davis. Milton Williams shined out. He got a new contract. Now we have to figure out how to do that again. And I now it has to come from a different perspective. Maybe not from the pipeline, but from like what you draft. And like it's kind of what you said. There's a lot of depth in the defensive line in general this draft. So, if you're talking about losing two guys on your defensive line, this would have been the best year to do it, knowing what the draft is going to provide.
Yeah, and even Bobby checks it again. It says Milton is a good player, but I'm still not paying him $26 million per year.
Right.
That's the other thing too. And also, this is a very good stat by Bob too. Checks in again. It says he actually agreed with me. This was a couple minutes ago. So Milton had a half a sack in 2023, broke out this season. So I can understand why that, like what I was alluding to too. Like basically, what I said, like Sweat and Milton Williams were gonna have like breakout years because the reason why they had to breakout year was because they were gonna get paid, and that's probably why they had to breakout year like they did.
Well, look, it's no secret that when a guy is up for a contract, they're going to attempt to try and put their best year forward.
Sure, yeah.
They want to get paid. Like, there's no secret behind that. Speaking of guys that possibly want to get paid or are already getting paid, and we have to figure out whether we want to continue to pay them, the next question I have is about a guy on the offense. Dallas Goedert right now is being widely discussed as either one of two things are going to happen. In order to free up more money for the cap, renegotiating his contract and like restructuring it, or if that can't happen, the possibility of trading Dallas Goedert. Now, I've gotten on to several conversations with people in our group chat, James, about defending Dallas Goedert, and I've kind of since walked that back because I think Dallas is a talented tight end. I think he's a top. I at one point thought he was a top 5 tight end. However, I've walked that back a little bit because, as someone pointed out to me, and has been widely proven to me, especially this season, he gets injured a lot. And when you're not on the field, you are a detriment. You're not an effective weapon. You are essentially a Joel Embiid. You're no help to this team. I'm sorry. Did that come out? I'm sorry. That was wrong. So Dallas Goedert.
Not wrong.
But Dallas Goedert is a guy that I think, and again, we talked about the defensive line being deep in this draft. Tight ends are very deep in this draft as well. This could be one of those seasons that could be appropriate for either giving Dallas Goedert the opportunity to restructure or for the Eagles to move on. Now, my question to you, Joe, is which would you rather have happen? Dallas stay and restructure, or Dallas go and draft a tight end?
I to me, I mean, it seems like the writing's on the wall, right? I mean, they signed Harrison Bryant on Thursday, and then yesterday they signed another tight end, Tyson Gleason, and you have Cal Conchera. So, like, to me, I mean, I would rather restructure and just keep him for one more year. But it sure as hell, it seems like he's got a foot and a half out the door. You know what I'm saying? And it sucks because Dallas Goedert is a hell of a talent, and he was great in the playoffs. But to your point, I mean, he is hurt a lot. The guy Gleason is actually a pretty good blocker. So and really, as good as Goddard is, they don't throw the ball to the tight end all that much. I mean, I know like I said, he did have a good postseason, but for the money he makes and for as much as he's injured, I think it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that he's out of here.
I mean, think about this. You have two receivers in AJ and Devontae, and then you have Saquon, who gets 500 touches a year.
Right.
It's tough. There's only one ball that goes around. And when they're grinding the clock down with long drives, you don't get 12 to 15, play drives. You don't get 12 to 15 offensive drives. You only get like 8 to 10. And that's by strategy alone. And so Dallas can't, there's got to be a point where in your offense, you're not going to take the best available guy. You're not always going to have the high caliber guy. But I think in this perspective, it's okay. I mean, Grant Katera is great at receiving, like he is. So you need a guy who's willing to get dirty. You got to get a guy that's willing to like muck it up with the other defensive linemen. And like that's that is going to be a priority. James, what do you think? Trade or restructure?
Man, I mean, like I said, I mean, you guys make up very, very good points. I do agree with what you guys are saying about this too. But the thing with Goddard, the problem is that like when he's on the field, I mean, he's efficient. Like he's a very, very good player. I think he's a very, very good talent. But the problem is it's just the lack of injuries. He just has so many injuries. And I think the other thing too is that maybe you can probably look in the draft to see I mean, this is going to be a tight end kind of type of draft. So it's good to know like that if Goddard, like say for example, like they move on from Goddard, I mean, I'm not going to say I'm going to go out of my way and draft Ty Warren, but if he falls, I mean, and I'll be like thinking, if he's there, maybe you should just go out and get him. I mean, but I mean, obviously the thing that I wanted to see him succeed. I mean, he's a very, very good player, but the lack of injuries are just something that kind of has to like take into an account too along the way too. So, I mean, if you move on from Goddard, I think you got the depth you need like for that. If you want to move on from him, I think the depth is there for the tight end position. I like what Cal Katera did. I think he did a very good job. Also, you got some other players that are in that wing. Obviously, I think Albert O's still here too. So there's a couple players that I'll be keeping a close eye on come training camp too. But yeah, it looks to me, I mean, if they move on from him, I mean, it's not for the best, but I mean, if it's best for the team, I'm all for it.
It's interesting because the way that I saw it is if Dallas Goedert does get traded away, Dallas Goedert's career with the Philadelphia Eagles would have been bookended by 2 Super Bowl championships.
Yeah.
Because if you recall, he was drafted when David Akers went on to the podium in Dallas and kind of put it out there. And then we drafted a Dallas in Dallas as Super Bowl champions. And then we win this one. And so his career will be bookended by Super Bowl championships with the Philadelphia Eagles. But you know what the Eagles are doing nowadays, guys? They're playing golf. They're relaxing. They're maxing and relaxing. You know where you can get all your golf equipment and gear? PGA Tour Superstore. James, tell them more about it.
Yeah, Joe. Today's show is sponsored by our friends over at where is it at? Here we go. PGA Tour Superstore.com. Hey, golf fans, it's time to level up your game with PGA Superstore. Don't miss out on this exclusive opportunity to get your hands on premium golf equipment, including hats, clubs, golf tees, and so much more at PGASuperstore.com. But remember to scan that QR code at the bottom of your screen and tee off in style today. That's at PGASuperstore.com or visit them online at PGASuperstore.com today.
You know what's ironic? This is non-Philly sports related, but kind of sad news in a way. When you mentioned golf, the first thing I thought of was Tiger Woods. Like it came out this week. Came out this week that he tore his Achilles, and it looks like. Who would have thought if you went back about 20 years ago? I don't think there's a person in the world that didn't think he was going to break Jack Nicklaus's record, and now like
right.
what a fall from grace,
It just proves to you a little bit that even in golf you have to take care of your body. You wouldn't think it because it's swinging a heavy club at a small ball, like you wouldn't think it, but there's so much power that and so much that goes into that swing that if you don't take care of your body, it's easy for you to get hurt. And Tigers is a big big example of that. And guys that come after him, McIlroy and people like that, like they have to kind of take into consideration taking better care of their bodies too.
Well, the Masters are coming up before you know it too, so that's a good time to like you said, golf. It'd be just a time for the Masters and also what they're going to be looking like too.
Well, weather's warming up. It's time to hit the links. No better place to go than PGA Tour Superstore.
Got that right, Bubba.
So, but let's move on to our Philadelphia Phillies. There's less than 2 weeks away from opening day, which is really hard to believe because I guess this is the privilege of when you have an Eagles team that goes to the Super Bowl and wins it, and you watch relevant football in your city, you get transitioned into baseball season fairly quickly, which I can dig because like I'm almost kind of still celebrating the Eagles championship that I'm almost not ready for Philly season to begin. I'm like, wait,
exactly,
I gotta ramp up now, like again.
Bobby, before we get into our Phillies talk, is that Bobby likes to party, LOL. Like,
okay, all right,
or like in the words of Rock, women weak at legs or something like that.
Well, you know what?
With all the money he has, who can blame him though? It's not like he's hurting for coin.
Yeah, no, that's true.
But no, all joking aside, though, wish him all the best, though.
Yeah,
hopefully, it's one of those things. With golf, like you said, it's a real sport that you have to keep a close eye on, and you got to control your body, kind of like a hockey player. It's the same kind of thing too.
There was a guy who I met once because I used to work at a country club, and guy was the golf instructor, and he used to I kind of poo-pooed golf. I was like, golf's not a real sport. He's like, oh, really? And he's like, it's controlled violence. I said, okay, that sounds very vicious. What do you mean?
Sure.
And he's like, okay, watch a guy swing a club as hard as he possibly can and drive it 250 yards. And you tell me that ain't a bit of controlled violence that you have to have in order to do that. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I could see your point. And so like he showed me two of his students, one who was like a 19-year-old that was like whacking the golf club like it was Barry Bonds. I was just like, all right, dude, like I could see how that could hurt. Like if you swung that club and at someone rather than at a golf ball, like I could see how that could hurt. So yeah, controlled violence.
Hey,
I don't mean to interrupt you again, but we got a comment here from our good friend of the boss man over at EOP back in the day. Al Safiri checks in with us. Yo, Al, how's it going, buddy? How you doing, man?
Good morning. We're about to get into your favorite topic, Al. Philly.
And you know what? You were talking about control of. I know there's a few guys that were in the wrong bedroom that got attacked by golf clubs that had some serious violence going on. You know what I'm saying?
Tiger Woods
Yeah.
knows all about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he understands controlled violence. He understands all of that, Joe. All of that.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you wind up in the wrong bedroom, somebody's swinging a club at you, man. You got some issues.
That's why
Yeah.
you gotta lock up your clubs, just like you gotta lock up your other weapons. Like,
Yeah,
you gotta
right?
just
Bobby checks in, says maybe John Daly was a bad influence on him. Oh my god.
hoopah.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure John Daly. We had John Daly with as much as he likes to get banged up. I'm sure he's woken up in a lot of strange bedrooms.
Yes.
Oh hell yeah.
And probably has wondered where some of his clubs are half of the time. So
I know, right?
but getting into the Phillies, getting back on track, getting into the
Yep,
Phillies, Joe, I gotta ask. So opening day less than 2 weeks away. I've asked this of other guests that have come on the show.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like Rob Thompson is going to canoinker with a lot of the starting batting order. My question to you is, if you were Rob Thompson, give me your starting batting order for
All right.
opening day.
Well, I think you got to go. You got to give this a chance. So I'm going Turner, Harper, Bohm, Schwartz, Castellanos. Then I'll go Stott. Then I'll go Realmuto, Marsh, and Kepler.
Okay. Now, why do you think that Turner? So Turner as a leadoff is an understandable take. My question to you is, do you think Bryce Harper is willing to move to the 2-hole?
I think, yeah. I mean, I know he'd rather bat third in a lot of ways, but I think to start the season, you got to do something, right? I mean, like you're coming back. It's like you're coming back with the same exact lineup that's failed 3 consecutive Octobers. Like 2022, the first year, no one ever criticizes them for 2022, and I get it because it was a magical run. And let's keep it real, Houston in all likelihood was a better team than the Phillies, but the Phillies were up 2-1, and the bats totally went. I mean, not only did the bats go cold, but shit, they got no hit the next night. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not going to kill them for 2022 because it was a great run. 2023, they're kicking Arizona's ass. You know what I mean? We go to Arizona, the bats go relatively cold, but game 5, you suck it up. You go back to Philly up 3-2. You come home only needing to win 1 game in a ballpark that like you were practically undefeated in, and you couldn't get a friggin' hit. So that's 2 years in a row. And then last year, starting pitching against the Mets was excellent. I mean, they should have never lost game 1. You know what I mean? Nola pitched good enough to win in game 3, and Suarez battled his ass off in game 4. Bullpen and the lineup couldn't get it done. So that's 3 consecutive Octobers. This team went cold. You got to try something. I mean, I'm disappointed. I'll be honest with you guys. Like, I don't know what they could have done, but I'm disappointed that we're bringing back the same outfield. I mean, hopefully Kepler can play, but this outfield, other than Castellanos, I'm sorry, but this outfield's not good enough.
So I'm going to get into that in a couple minutes because I have a really extreme theory on what they should do if I were Rob Thompson, and it's going to come, no pun intended, out of left field. But I want to kind of dig in a little bit more with what you're talking about right now. Do you think that this team currently constructed, because Dave Dombrowski doesn't make like a ton of waves at the trade deadline. We've seen that in past years. My question to you is, do you think this team is currently constructed is a World Series team contender?
I think they are because of the pitching. And I have a theory on this. So the Phillies are better when there's no expectations on them. Like for example, 2022 came out of nowhere. As soon as they got up 2-1 on Houston and people were like, oh shit, they might actually win this shit, They lose 3 in a row, right?
Right.
The following year, they're the wild card team again. They play an Atlanta team that, Atlanta was unreal the second year they played them. They
Right.
beat Atlanta. Then they play Arizona because Arizona knocks off the Dodgers. Phillies come out. Yeah, they get up 2-0. Everybody just assumes they're in the World Series. Guess what? The pressure was on. Boom. They lost 4 out of the next 5.
Yep.
And then last year they finally break free. They win the division. Jason Stark, all the guys are picking the Phillies to win the World Series. What do? They come out second half of the year. They coast. They lay an egg against the Mets. So my theory is that there's really, if you guys think about it, there's barely any buzz about this team this year. Part of it could be the Eagles because the Eagles just won the Super Bowl. But like even nationally, I feel like, everybody and their mother saying Dodgers, the Mets signed Soto, Braves are getting healthy again. And so ironically, this could be the time where this team kind of flies under the radar. And if they can find a way to get hot at the right time, this could be the year they actually make the run.
Yeah.
So I want to get into, you brought up the rotation and that could carry the day. And I got to ask, because I've asked other people, and honestly, I have a hard time debating against it. But does this team have one of the best rotations, if not the best rotation, for starting pitchers in the MLB?
Oh God, yeah. If you look right now, it comes down to the kid they got from Florida. If he's healthy, because he 2 years ago he was really good. Last year he was hurt, but if Luzardo could be healthy, you're looking at Aaron Nola could. Sanchez looks like he's going to take another step forward. So, and then now the hope is that Suarez doesn't get hurt. But you're looking at Nola and Suarez as your 4 and 5 possibly.
Yeah. And conceivably, you got to remember Andrew Painter is waiting in the wings.
Right.
And you got that kind of rocket of an arm kind of sitting there. There's a possibility, whether or not they do something or not, at the trade deadline, whether Ranger stays on the team and goes into the bullpen as a long relief because he succeeded at that a couple of years ago, or you start Painter in the bullpen and you build him up. You kind of ramp him up for the following season, so he could be a sure starting pitcher that next season when we lose Ranger. And I agree with you, and I have a hard time going against it just to be a contrarian of saying that this pitching rotation isn't one of the top in the MLB. I got to ask you, James, the same question. What do you think about this rotation? Do you think this is the top rotation in the MLB?
It could be. It really could be. I just, I want to see this team play well. I want to see this team have success like they always have. But gonna admit, I think sometimes when it really comes down to it, it's just sometimes when it really matters the most. The Phillies. The last 3 years, gonna admit, have their fair share of obstacles. Even Bobby alluded to too when he said the Phillies are running it back and probably have the same results as they always do, but. The other thing that I took out of it too is that I found really surprising is just to see how good this rotation is going to be. Obviously you got Wheeler as your opening day starter, and then you got Sanchez, and then you got probably Luzardo. Ranger to me. I want to see Ranger succeed. I want to see him play very, very well. But the problem is that last year, I guess he pitched his arm too close to the nest. I guess if that's a word or saying something about that. But if Noah can be back to where he was back in 2022 in that postseason, and also get back to Aaron Nola, that Cy Young kind of Aaron Nola, and without nibbling, like our good friend Damon Salim would talk about. But the thing about it too is, like I said, I want this team to succeed. I do, but I I just hope it's not the same results, obviously. But I mean, that's probably just another story for another day here. But I mean, but they look good right now in training, spring training right now. But hopefully they can keep it that way until October.
I mean, here's the thing. Think about this, and I'm going to put this out there for all you guys to think about.
Mm-hmm.
You got Zach Wheeler, who
Yeah.
at any given point in time could be a Cy Young winner. You have Aaron Nola, that if putting a good season together, and he could be a Cy Young winner. Lazardo is potentially, when having a healthy season and a good season, could be a Cy Young candidate. Ranger Suarez in the beginning of last season, the first half of last season, was a Cy Young candidate. Christopher Sanchez, as Joe alluded to, is on his way up and taking another step forward. He could be a Cy Young candidate. You're talking about 5 potential pitchers that are either Cy Young potential winners or Cy Young candidates.
Yeah.
That means that level of talent, it exudes. You can't say that about every pitcher, because if I mentioned another pitcher we have on the team, Taijuan Walker, you couldn't tell me that he could sniff the Cy Young award.
Yeah.
You couldn't tell me that like another starting pitcher that we have in the AAA or just in general could sniff the Cy Young.
Yeah.
That's why I feel so strongly about this starting rotation.
Yeah, and even Big Al Safiri checks in and says rotation depth was a big issue in that game, and this Phillies' success last year was, well, not success, like the reason why they had their obstacles last year too.
I mean, and that goes back to what you said. It goes back to what Joe said about the idea that Ranger, we all like Ranger, but I think we like Ranger when Ranger's thriving.
Yeah.
When we wear him down, when he's got back issues, when he's got arm issues, we don't see the best Ranger. And I think when
we saw that a lot last year too, gonna admit.
Yeah. And when we see the best Ranger, honestly, I think he is a top line pitcher. I'm not gonna throw away a guy because I feel like we've put him through so many innings. Sometimes there are guys that just, like they don't have that stamina. Look, not everyone's built like a Zach Wheeler. Like
No.
I hate to make a news flash. Not everyone's built like that. But a guy like Ranger could be built in enough of a way that could, give you some significant innings, significant wins, and significant, gameplay. The guys, let's not forget, this is a guy who's one of the top fielders at his position. And I know people think, well, he's a pitcher, who cares? When those guys are doing like little broken bat, little dribblers, having a pitcher that can field well matters. It matters.
Yeah. You brought up Andrew Painter earlier, and people they're speculating that he may come, say, June, July.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Painter could be a big factor into Rangers' success in October, because when Painter comes up, you either could go to a 6-man rotation, which Zach Wheeler doesn't like, so maybe you can kind of. Maybe you could kind of like maybe skip a Ranger start here or there to try to keep his innings down, so he is a little fresh in October.
It's interesting because there was an interview with Rob Thompson last week about on WIP on the morning show that they discussed, and he had subtly put it in there, but I caught it. He subtly put it in there that if Andrew Painter comes in, that they could be looking at a 6-man rotation.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I go to a 6-man rotation just because you don't want to throw off Wheeler, Nola,
Right.
Lazardo's like mojo. You don't want to give them an extra day of rest just for the sake of Now, if it's like you said, if you want to give someone like Ranger who needs that rest to keep him and to keep the energy and the fire still stoked in him for the remainder of the season, that I can get on board with, because you're not forcing Andrew Painter to have 25 starts. You're not
Right.
forcing someone like Ranger to have 50 starts. You're forcing the issue of allowing them to split starts and allowing Ranger to maybe not have have more gas at the end of the season.
Yeah.
And that's
Right.
only going to help us, especially early on, whether it's the wild card or the divisional round, whether it's shortened series. I mean, you're talking about, yes, we still, I have to still see a lot out of this bullpen. I think it's still much to be desired, but I've said that in 2022, and they came out and shocked me that they actually had a decent bullpen.
Well,
So for me, I need to be shocked once again. But in order to be shocked, you have to be a part of the game. In order to be
Right.
part of the game, you have to get your own apparel. We have a great sponsor with rallyhouse.com to go get all your Philadelphia Phillies apparel before opening day. We're almost 2 weeks away. Monday will be 2 weeks from the home opener. So
Right.
go get your Phillies gear at rallyhouse.com. Tell them more about it, James.
Yeah, Joe, and also today's show is sponsored by our friends over at rallyhouse.com. Hey, Philly fanatics, rallyhouse.com is your destination to go for all things Philadelphia Phillies merchandise, from hats to jerseys. Don't worry, they got everything you need and got you covered just in time for, like we just brought up, opening day and everything in between. Now you can pick up your gear and get it delivered fast by scanning the QR code and score big right now at rallyhouse.com, a proud sponsor to the Philadelphia Phillies, and that is at rallyhouse.com, or visit them online at rallyhouse.com. That's at rallyhouse.com today.
Now
hey,
listen.
I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you, but I just real quick. You mentioned the bullpen. Here's a really great little tidbit to think about for October. So say we're in a short series, right? You run out Wheeler, Sanchez, Luzardo, and Nola. Well, who are two weapons if you limit their innings, who are two legit weapons you can run out of that bullpen in big spots? Ranger Suarez from the left side, Andrew Painter from the right side. Andrew Painter, a la, remember the year we played Tampa Bay in the World Series? They brought up a young guy by the name of David Price. Wound up being, remember
Right.
David Price played a big role in game 7 versus the Red Sox in
Sure.
beating them as a young pitcher. And I can envision Andrew Painter possibly having that same type of role here in Philadelphia.
I'll go one step closer. Like Zach Eflin was like that David Price in that 2022 World Series too.
Yeah.
So it was good to see about that kind of stuff too. Yeah, but that's a very good point by you, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: is if we're bringing this guy along, and it's like Joe said, you have those two rockets of an arm, and you're talking about having that on a shortened series. You're talking about minimize. You're also talking about in the playoffs, lengthening that bullpen, because if you have those two long reliever studs in your
Right.
bullpen along with that rotation, that means there's less pressure on the setup guy. That means there's
Mhm.
less pressure on those closers. That means that there's just you're getting to the 7th and 8th inning, and if you, we've discussed this in the beginning of this talk, is that if the bats are doing their job, the pitching has every potential of being able to do their job, but we have to get the batting right. I mean, that is really what this boils down to. This team needs to figure out how to be more dynamic than just putting the ball over the fence. They have to figure out, and this is where, much as people want to poo-poo Alec Baum, this is where I think a guy like Alec Baum actually can help this offense more, because he's not the guy that, now he's been doing it more in spring training this season, but he's not the guy that always puts the ball over the fence. He led the team in doubles this past season. So you have to understand, doubles can score just as much as a home run can, because if you got a guy like Turner or Harper on second, you have the opportunity of scoring that guy every time. And one run matters, especially if you're trading positions with that guy on second, and you still have a whole rest of the lineup with Castellanos and Stott and JT still coming up. These guys need to be able to put it together not just by hitting the ball over the fence, but by hitting the ball in where the other defenders aren't.
Yeah.
Hit
Hit
them
them
where
where
they
they
ain't.
ain't.
Yep.
Hit them where they ain't.
So my next question to you, Joe, is this. I'm curious. We talked about this team potentially being a World Series contender. We talked about the shortened series. We talked about the lineup, and we talked about the rotation. The next thing is I want to get your win prediction leading into this season. What do you think the Phillies have to do as far as wins are concerned in order to be a strong enough contender going into October?
Man, that's a tough one because I mean they're in arguably the toughest division in baseball, or at least one of them. I mean NL West is tough too, but
Right.
I mean you got a healthy Braves team and you got a Mets team that just signed Juan Soto. Although I'll tell you guys though, the Mets, everybody's hype on the Mets, and I get it because they got Soto. But let's be honest, though, they're starting Clay Holmes on opening day. I mean, is their pitching?
Jesus.
You know what I'm saying? Like Clay Holmes was the Yankees' closer last year, so I kind of have a little bit of. I think the Mets could be that team that was a good story last year, and everybody thinks they're going to take the step this year, and then all of a sudden you look and you're like, nah. So I'm going to say the Phillies. I'm going to give the Phillies about 90. I'm going to give them about right around last year, about 94, 95 wins.
Now, do you think that with 94, 95 wins, do you think they can win the division with that? And do you think winning the division matters? Because if you're a division winner and you're a top 2 seed, you get a bye. And now, unlike in NFL, like when you get a bye, it's a blessing in disguise. But in the MLB, at least recently, you get that bye, it's like a curse.
Yeah.
Especially if Philadelphia's sick too.
You know what? I think Atlanta wins the division again this year. So I think the Phillies go the wild card route, and honestly, I kind of like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Al Safiri checks in again, says I think the Mets won't be as good as everyone thinks. Pitching wasn't really addressed. Yeah, the pitching depth wasn't addressed. I mean, they got the hitting, but they don't got the pitching, so that's going to be the big problem.
Well, that's the thing. They have to out hit everybody. But I don't always like quoting them, but it's the truth. And Ruben Amaro always said when he was GM here, pitching outclasses hitting. Good pitching outclasses good hitting. It just does. Because you can have as good of a hitter as you want, but if a pitcher can, play with that hitter's mind, it can make any hitter look like a fool.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just the facts. And I don't completely disagree with that at all. And I think the Mets are going to have a lot of struggles because if your game plan is beating teams 10-9, good luck when you have to face pitchers that are really good.
Right.
Because you're not going to be able to out hit them, especially if you're the Phillies, where we share both. We have good hitters that when they put it together can annihilate you. And then we have the good pitching rotation. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about both today, because honestly, I think it's not just one side of the coin or the other. But if the pitching rotation thrives like we think that they can, if the batting order doesn't do anything, then we're still stuck in neutral. But if both sides of the coin work in tandem, this is a well-oiled machine that not many teams, including the Dodgers, in my mind, can stop. I mean, like that's just my takeaway is I think that this lineup, as far as the players that are on this team, the batting lineup, I think they outdo the Dodgers batting lineup. I think that this rotation can compete with the Dodgers rotation. I'm not saying they can be better. I'm thinking they can compete with them. But, it's for me, I'm a kind of right along that lines. James, before we get to the regular season, I do want to get your take on what you think the wins prediction is going to be, and whether you think winning the division is possible, and whether it matters.
I was looking at the Phillies 2022 basic week record that they got to the World Series and all that. they almost like the majority of the games. I mean, you thought about when they won that NL pennant in 2022. They only won like 88 or 89 games that year. And I'm thinking like, okay, I mean, the standard is obviously postseason and go to a World Series and winning and all that. But I will tell you this. I don't think a National League Eastern Division title, I don't think it should matter for the Phillies because the way they had the success in 2022 and 2023 when they were a wild card team, yeah, sure, you'll like to have the bye week here and there, and also you want to get you guys some rest and all that. But majority of the team that played in that 2022 team is that they were playing so at a high level that usually when the time calls for it, I would just say this. I think the one thing I would say is that I don't think an NL East will do anything. I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, you'll be an NL East championship, and you'll be raising another championship, like another 20, or like raising another championship flag. But no, I think when you're the hottest team in baseball, that's all should matter. And if the Phillies can be like that hot, I'm not saying like go on a losing streak and start to get hot around October or so, but it should really show you that 2022, even though you got in the last week of the season, I mean, it should be the standard that, yeah, like champion. I mean, the division shouldn't matter. Just getting into the postseason should really matter the most too. And I mean, that's the thing I take out of it too. I don't think an NL East will do something about it, but at the same time, I mean, yeah, I mean, if they win the NL East, that's great. But I think more importantly, I think just becoming a wild card team will be better for them.
So here's my thing: is I think nothing should come easy for this team because they don't. And I know this is going to sound harsh, but I think in some ways they have to work for everything because they've had things easy 2 years in a row,
right?
And I think we've seen that when they've had things easy, they take the foot off the gas, thinking they can always push it back down on the floor, and they can't. So they need to have things hard, just like 2022.
Exactly.
It's got to be difficult. You got to make things, not that they have to make things more difficult, but they have to look at things as being difficult. Everything has to be a challenge, a new challenge for them to overcome. You're no longer the darlings. You know, the Dodgers have taken that role. So you have to be willing to fight to go get that back. Now, I told you guys before we started this topic that I had an extreme take about what they should do. And Joe brought up about how they have to fix the outfield. I have an extreme take on how they should. There's going to be a lot of egos bruised, but it's like I said, they have to do things that are difficult, and they have to make difficult decisions. Mm-hmm. I think my outfield should look like this. Trey Turner in center, Nick Castellanos, and Bryce Harper. Those should be my outfilders. And I think that my infield will look like Alec Baum at third.
Okay.
Aiden Miller at shortstop. Bryson Stott at second base. And Kyle Schwarber at first. And then JT Realmuto in the backstop. With somebody, whether it's Kyle or whether it's Nick or whatever, that you can alternate them with days off as in the DH spot. So you can then, sub in Marsh for Nick in the outfield. You can sub in JT for Kyle at first base to give him a break. So you can have more flexibility in this team. And I believe that if you had Harper, Turner, and Castellanos in the outfield. Now I'll ask you, Joe. That seems like an extreme take, I know. But if you had that outfield, Castellanos, Turner, and Harper, would you feel better about this outfield?
Yeah, but the only thing is, Aiden Miller is a hell of a prospect, but is he ready yet? If you fast forward, 6 months to a year, I could be with you. You know what I mean? But Aiden Miller, I think, he's going to start. He's going to start the season down the minors. So, Like, but what you're saying could very well be the outfield in like 2 years. You know what I mean? A year, and maybe even next year. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, I would like the outfield. Although I would, I mean, well, if you need a DH, then I would probably just keep Marsh in center then, or keep Marsh in the outfield and then play Harper at first and just let Schwartz DH. You could do that too, right? Right?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, that's fine.
That's fine because the main crux of my
Turner.
take is
I
Turner
think
in center
basically
field.
a lot of the things you're saying is Turner eventually needs to go to the outfield. I think that's pretty much the bottom line.
Yeah,
I mean,
That's pretty much your main point,
because
right?
the log jam really is, in order to get Aiden Miller up here, and you want to hold on to Alec Baum, and you're
Right.
not going to move Stott, and Harper and First is interchangeable. You have to figure out, okay, Aiden Miller currently is playing shortstop, while the
Right.
current shortstop is Trey Turner. The big piece that we need in outfield, and I think it's the biggest gripe that we have in the outfield, is a consistent center fielder. Well, Turner could play center field, whether he wants to or not, and that's been the big contention.
Right.
That's
whether
how it
or not
works.
he's willing to or not. Look, dude, you are getting paid. It's not a willing. This isn't a volunteering thing. You don't
Right.
get to like call your shot like that. You get to go and play baseball in front of the best fans in the damn world. You keep your mouth shut and you go where they tell you to go. Look, Harper could have said the same thing. What did that guy do? He came off of Tommy John and learned how to figure out how to play first base. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to help the team. So Trey, you have to figure out what's going to best help your team. You want to put that ring on that finger, you got to figure out how to best orient yourself to make this team thrive. And look, I agree with you, Joe. Aiden might not be ready right in, opening day. I get that. But this kid's coming up at a high rate of speed. So we got to be ready to move that log jam when he's ready. Otherwise, we're going to waste the prospect.
No,
Yeah.
I agree with you. And you know what's funny? And we have another guy. And what do you do with the kid Crawford? Because he's close to coming up too.
Yeah.
Maybe I mean, they're stuck paying Trey all these years. So he kind of, being the fact that he has to go to the outfield, it kind of blocks Crawford unless Crawford maybe moves to maybe when Castellanos leaves, but Castellanos got 2 more years.
Right.
So maybe when Castellanos leaves, then Crawford comes up to the outfield or he gets dealt. Maybe he gets dealt at the deadline.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. But when you have an interior guy like Aiden Miller, you're kind of, look, you don't want to lose Crawford or Miller. Let's be real. But the idea that you have to move some pieces around and maybe you have to work. And I get the argument. You don't want to bruise any egos. Look, take the $300 million that we paid you, go to the local bar and have somebody else pump up your ego. We're not here to do that here. So
you could hire a lot of hype men for $300 million.
Yeah, you could. You could hire a whole damn Cheers bar to hype you up for $300 million.
Right.
But if you want to go and hype up the Phillies, go to our local GameTime.co sponsor and go get yourself tickets for your Philadelphia Phillies for this upcoming season. Tell them more about it, James.
Yeah, today's show is also sponsored by our friends at GameTime.co. Calling all busy Phillies fans, need tickets last minute? Don't worry, GameTime.co has got you covered for your Phillies tickets and everything included. You can check your seat, you can check out your seat view, and before you buy, you can snag on great discounts and so much more at GameTime.co. But remember to scan that QR code right next to Kyle Schwarber or visit them online at GameTime.co today. And let's go, Phils.
All right. Go ahead, Joe.
No, I'm sorry. Speaking of Schwarber, did you guys see that it's apparently they're talking to him about an extension, but not JT. It looks like JT's going to play out the year. But Schwarber, hopefully, maybe they may work something out.
Well, it's interesting because I thought about this. Now, Kyle hasn't done it in a while. The idea that if they do extend Schwarber and let JT go,
yeah,
Schwarber played catcher at one point. There is a point where do you ask that question because a lot of people are not altogether that happy with the backup catching situation. Now, that could be one thing. We talked about log jams at different positions. Marchant is another guy who's a high talented prospect that is being log jammed and kind of blocked by someone like JT. So do you keep extending JT and kind of prolonging Marchant's potential? At some point in every baseball team, you have to take a chance with your prospects. You just do.
Yeah.
When we brought up back in, what was it, 06, 05, when we started to bring up Howard and Utley and Rollins, like,
yep,
we didn't know they were gonna. We had hopes that they would become what they inevitably became, but we didn't know for a fact. I mean, Shane Victorino, guys like that, like Chooch. We had no idea. We had hopes that they would, but to have them mesh as the unit that they are, you have to then take a gamble, which is why, maybe I'm taking the extreme take of bringing Aiden Miller or a Crawford. Like, I'm willing to turn the page because at some point you have to. I mean, we are an aging team, and at some point down the road, you have to bring these guys along to figure out whether you have something or you don't.
Well, let me ask you about this, Joe, too. Since you brought up, like, if we give it of Aiden Miller, though, I mean, what the logic with Trey Turner at center field, like, what you do with that? I mean, like, if like Aiden Miller's on the, like, say for example, we let Aiden Miller go elsewhere and like basically resurrect his career somewhere else, right? Like, do you still think Trey Turner moves to center field more than anything?
No, see, here's the thing. Right now, I feel like if you move Aiden Miller and you keep Trey Turner, Trey's going to feel more secure that his position as shortstop is secure.
Yeah, that's the thing I was trying to ask you too.
Yeah, I feel like if you put the pressure on Trey, that look, this kid, you need to make a guy like Trey sweat a little.
Yeah,
like you got to let these superstars feel the heat a little.
Absolutely,
and like you got to take them off their perch. And sometimes, and that's why the reason why I said nothing's got to come easy this year. And it's not that I think that they should just struggle for the sake of struggling, but you got to make these players believe that just because you're being paid to do X, Y, and Z, and you're being paid a lot of money, that you should just rest on your laurels. Because we have these other guys, these other kids that are willing to come in. And, we brought it up earlier with the Eagles. There's a rotation. There's a way that you have to, like, turn the page. Dabrowski's trying to bring that along. Now, that being said, are they as far along as the Eagles? No. But they're getting there, and inevitably, you're going to have to start to ask yourself, are these prospects worth bringing up now, or are we just prolonging the veterans' time being here? Holding on to players too long, we've seen it here in Philadelphia far too many times. Sometimes it can be a detriment.
Way too many.
Yeah. Speaking of teams in the rebuild and trying to figure out their identity, I wanted to mesh both these topics together because both are coming to an end and both are kind of in the same plane of existence. The Flyers and the Sixers. So I got to ask, which product of these two is better to watch? Joe, I want to start with you.
I'll let you go first, Joe. I'm going to be.
I feel like you're asking me to shine a turd. I mean, basically, they're both kind of dog shit to watch right now. But I mean, obviously, I'm going to say the Flyers because I can't even sit through a Sixers game. I mean, this is like I feel like I'm having flashbacks of like Tony Roten and those guys with out there now.
I thought you were going to go Gerald Henderson and stuff.
I was going to say, what's his name? Jeremy Grant.
Yeah, him too. I mean, I mean, the Sixers are in must lose situations. I mean, I like I said, I can't even remember the last time I even turned them on. And then last night I looked at my phone and like they were winning at halftime, and I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me? Like, please don't win." You know, thank God they lost, because I mean, this at least the Flyers. You know, you could say what you want about the Flyers, but the Flyers have what, like 2 or 3 first round picks each of the next few seasons. I think they got like 9 picks in the first 3 rounds.
Yeah,
And the Flyers have a lot of cap space coming up. So, you know, like
we
I've
talked
been
about
patient.
this.
I've been patient with them. You know what I mean? But they
Yeah.
better do some shit this offseason.
We talked about this the other week. Is that the Flyers have 7 picks in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah.
For the next 2 seasons, and to be honest, like this team, Danny Briere, and this is one of my next questions. So, which person has done a better GM job, Daryl Morey or Danny Briere?
I mean, you got to say Briere, but in all fairness, I mean, you know, Morey, I mean, the Joel Embiid contract and the George contract are 2 of the 3 worst in all professional sports. I mean, you could put that up there with Deshaun Watson. You know what I mean? You know, I mean, you look at the worst contracts in sports. It's Deshaun Watson, Joel Embiid, Paul George, and I was like laughing to myself because they're like, oh, the Sixers are going to try to trade Paul George this summer. I'm like, no shit. You know what I mean?
Right.
Here's the thing, and I'll go one step further. So, a lot of people might not remember this, but I do, because I just said he's a thief. The guy by the name of Jay Cutler was a starting quarterback for the Chicago Bears on a losing team, and they handed this guy, they backed up the Brinks truck to give this guy over $200 million for 4 years, and he hadn't done squat for the team. And I said, basically, the day that happened, I said, Jay Cutler just stole money from Chicago. Because, like, there's no other way of going about it. And then he pouted about it. And that's one of the reasons why Alshon Jeffrey left the Chicago Bears and came to the Philadelphia Eagles, because he couldn't deal with being around Jay Cutler. He couldn't deal with being around a guy who was crying about everything, but was handed everything. And look, Joel Embiid is one and the same. He's been handed every opportunity to succeed. He's been handed every financial opportunity to, you know, secure his life and his family's life. And I get it. His body breaks down. But I kind of push back on this.
Well, I mean, I'll say something about Paul George real quick before you get into your point, Joe. Yeah. This is like Andrew Bynum all over again, but the difference is he's playing.
Yeah, I agree with that. At least with Andrew Bynum, he never stepped on the court in a damn Sixers uniform.
Not Bowen, though. Bowen was crazy times for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know what's funny? I mean, hey, since we're comparing shitty contracts, maybe we should have Paul George and Bynum bowls. Who bowls better? You know?
DeMarco Murray and Byron Maxwell versus Byron Maxwell and DeMarco Murray.
I know, right?
We need the Sixers to have like a corresponding bowling team with the PBA, the Professional Bowling Association. We need them to have like the Sixers bowling team, because if you have Bynum, George, I don't know, you get Tony Roden, who knows?
Didn't like Jimmy Rollins have like
a Carter Williams?
Didn't like Jimmy Rollins have like a bowling tournament back in the day too?
Yeah, they used to.
They used to do it to raise money for the Phillies. It used to be night out with the Phils.
Well, they're not going to be raising money. They're just going to steal money from.
Well, they already have done that.
Yeah, so exactly.
They ought to get money back. It should be like open bar for everybody who comes in. Open bar and open buffet for everyone that comes in. But like this is the thing is. This is why I kind of push back with the Joel Embiid health thing. For as long as he's had health issues, and he's had health issues since he came into the league, you look at guy, and look, I never praise LeBron James, never on this show, but I will praise him in the sense that the only reason why LeBron is still in the league now is because he takes care of his body with
Right.
whether it's cryogenics, whether it's hiring a personal chef, whether it's hiring trainers, regardless of what it is, he puts his money into furthering his career.
Right.
Joel Embiid hasn't even pushed his money into expanding his career.
Yeah.
Like, let alone
He
extending.
looks like he don't even want to be there. He don't even look like he wants to be there, Joe.
Well, James, if you get a total of $500 million, $500 million in 10 years' time, I don't give a damn who you are.
I get that.
If you have the ability to have that much money, you should also have the ability to be able to hire people.
That's right.
To bring in to help you. If you can't figure out how to be good at like good nutrition, hire a damn personal chef to live with you. I mean, for crying out loud, like what was it, Marsh?
Yeah, I mean, really.
Is it Marsh and Baum or Marsh and Stott that live
Something
together
like that.
and they have their own personal chef?
Yeah.
Those guys don't even make a third of what you make.
Right.
And they can do it. Why the hell can't you? So that's my pushback with that. Now,
every single year with Embiid too, I'm not gonna lie to you. Every time I see him play on the court, I mean, this year was no exception. But I mean, the last couple years, he looked like he was looking like more tired and fatigued every single time. He looked more tired and fatigued every time, and I'm thinking like, this dude's gonna, like, I don't know, dude. He's just, you gotta unload him. I'm sorry, I hate to say it.
You know what's the real damn shame of it too? It's like, like obviously we're all criticizing Embiid for not taking care of himself, and some of it's bad luck. He's had some injuries that that like hit in the eye and all that shit. But the ironic thing is, like, Morey made terrible decisions with Embiid and with Paul George, but it's funny. All his other decisions were actually good. I mean, McCain looks like he was a hell of a draft pick. You know what I mean? Now he's hurt. The kid Quentin Grimes, they traded Caleb Martin for. That kid looks like he could at least play. And then, they signed all these, like the French guy, Yabusele, looks like he can play. It's so maddening because if you only had a healthy Embiid and a healthy George with the supporting cast, this actually would be a hell of a basketball team.
Yes.
No, you're right about that.
And so that leads me to my next question, because when this team goes into this offseason and gets healthy, you come back the next season, and we could talk about with both teams, like with the Flyers and utilizing their draft, and hopefully the Sixers get the 6th or 5th overall pick in the draft. Both teams could potentially reload and look completely different by next season. So my next question is, which team is closer to not winning, but making a finals? The Flyers making the Stanley Cup Finals, or the Sixers making the NBA Finals? Which team is closer?
I gotta say the Flyers, only because I have no confidence that Embiid's ever going to play again.
Okay.
I mean, it's such a hard question to answer, because if you gave me a crystal ball and said, hey, by the way, the Sixers are going to win the lottery and add Cooper Flag, and then Embiid's going to be healthy, well, shit, I'd say the Sixers. You know what I mean? But who knows that? I mean, looking at it now, you got to say the Flyers. And the other thing is the sport. I mean, hockey, you could sneak in as an 8 seed in hockey and go on a run, where basketball, you need to be pretty legit in basketball.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. I mean, you think about it, 2010 with the Flyers, they got in the last game of the season on the shootout, and they were the 7th seed. I mean, and even the Kings, like 2 years later, what our guys going to admit too, but they won a Stanley Cup. So yeah, I mean, it's not about who's the best team; it's about who's the hottest team in hockey. So I mean, that's been proven, obviously. But yeah, for me, I got to go with how much of a Flyers homer head on my Flyers puck head I am. I think the Flyers, if they get the draft picks they need, and also what they do in the offseason and what they need to do to try to get back on track. I mean, this team could be a good team, but in the next couple of years or so. But yeah, I mean, the last couple of games haven't been easy for them. But I still have a little bit of faith, but not much of faith. But I mean, now it's just like, okay, just see what you got going into the next season. Gonna admit.
I mean, here's my thing: is I think it could be the Sixers, honestly, because I think that if Morey is planning, first off, I think Morey's on a short leash. I honestly don't think he'll be
Definitely.
the GM next year. I think if you have a guy that comes in right now, the talks are that the guy that was the Golden State Warriors GM is thinking about coming in, Bob Burks.
Right.
And if that were to happen, someone like Joel Embiid and Paul George are two major assets that even if you were to find a trade partner, you could potentially having McCain and having the number 5 or 6 pick overall in this draft and having Tyrese Maxey, maybe retaining Quentin Grimes and the Frenchman and having Bona, you could technically, if you could get a decent, not a great return, but a decent return for Embiid and Paul George from two separate trade partners, I honestly think that this team could turn the corner quickly enough, given the right general manager, given the right management of this team. I think Morey, as much as we can point out some of the things he's done right, has done a lot more wrong than right. And I hope for both to succeed, but I honestly think that the Flyers are three years away. I think given whatever management changes happen with the Sixers could be a year or so away, year or two away. So I think,
Depending on like what Daryl Morey does, though,
or if Daryl Morey's even in charge anymore, like that.
Right.
That's my point.
I'll take back Billy King any day, though. You know, like the way he.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I'd go as far as Pat. What was his name?
Pat Croce.
Pat Croce.
I would take Croce back in a heartbeat, dude.
I'll take Pat Croce. I'll back up the Brinks truck to give him a third of what Joel Embiid's making. He can come off the Caribbean from looking for pirate treasure. I'll give you pirate treasure, dude.
Here's a question for you guys, though.
Sure.
Say Embiid, they don't even know what they're going to do with Embiid. Like Embiid may explore some weird, wild, crazy surgery and might be out all next year. How soon until clutch management and Tyrese Maxey say, you know what, get me the hell out of here?
Well, that's what I'm worried about. That's why I feel like there has to be a change quicker for the management, and that's why I feel like the longer you drag this out, the sooner that may happen. Yeah, and they can't afford that. Honestly, they just can't.
Yeah, but here's another thing. Okay, so let's just play the game that Paul George has done, right? And you pray that like a team like Golden State or Atlanta or somebody wants to take a shot and you get expiring contracts. So say you don't get shit for them, okay? Because you're not going to really get anything, all right? All right. And Embiid's out. And say you do get a high pick this year, and Maxey goes, hey, you know what? I want out of here. I don't want to be part of a rebuild. Well, you do have McCain in the backcourt, right? Mm-hmm. And say you don't get Cooper Flagg, but say this, you get like the third pick and it's a guard, all right?
Right.
Would the future, as much as I love Tyrese Maxey, with no Embiid and being stuck with that contract, is it better for the future of this franchise to trade Tyrese Maxey, get out of, and get like a boatload of first round picks?
Well, let me just preface this. It's one thing to have a general manager, whether it's Daryl Morey or anybody else, to trade away successfully, no matter who you're getting back, trade away one max contract in one offseason. For them to trade away two, which would be Paul George and Joel Embiid in one offseason, would be a miracle, because you would need to find two suitable trade partners.
Right.
Now you're talking about potentially trading away three, because you got to remember Maxey's on a max contract now. So you're now talking about something that's never been done in the history.
Well, I think Embiid's untradeable though. Like my point is, if Embiid misses the year, like there isn't a general manager in the league. Nobody's going to trade for him at $60 million a year. He's paid up to 2029. So the only prayer you have a trade in Embiid is somehow he gets his ass back on the court and shows something.
I would agree with you ordinarily, except you got to look at what Gobert got. Like Gobert was an untradeable acquisition for a long time, and that guy got traded twice. And he maybe had a reclamation project in Minnesota, but like this Joel Embiid, I feel like will still play, but it's a matter of what role he'll play. Whether you're like talking about putting him with the San Antonio Spurs and him and
DeMar DeRozan with them?
well, no, the big guy, the
Wembanyama.
Oh,
Wembanyama.
Wembanyama. That's right. That's
Like
right.
you pair him with Wembanyama, and you're talking about something that could be sellable. If you could sell anybody on anything, given the circumstances, but you have to understand with Joel Embiid, he's never going to be the player he once was.
Mhm.
That so you got to know that going into whatever trade you're going to get. And so for me, it's you got to trade Joel Embiid first. Then you got to trade Paul George because Paul George is going to be 35 come next year. He's dealing with knee injuries. He's dealing with hand injuries. The only thing this guy's not dealing with is a brain injury. Oh, wait, he's dealing with that too because he had a podcast. Never mind. So, like that's the
Such
difference.
an imbecile he is.
Well, here's the thing is I hope for the Sixers' sake, and this is why I put the Flyers ahead as far as progression, but if there's a changeover, because I agree, Briere does a better job than Morey, but could Briere do a better job than Burks or, somebody else like the OKC assistant general manager? I don't know. I don't think he could because these guys are used to playing that, quick rebuild game. Look where OKC is in the short amount of time.
Yeah,
Look where
right.
Golden State was in the short amount of time. It is possible to turn an NBA team around quickly. It's not so quick to do with an NHL team.
Yeah, the other thing about Briere too is he's in the Sam Hinkie tearing it down stage.
Yeah.
I mean, we I like what I've seen of Briere, but let's keep it real. We got to see what he does with these picks and
it's easy
trades and stuff.
It's easy to tear something down.
Right.
It's harder. I always said I'm good at demolition, but I can never be good at building.
Right.
Okay, that's the difference. You could be good at demoing and tearing down something. You may not be good at building it back up. And, like that's the difference. I agree with you there. And I think Morey's always been a guy that's like a patchwork guy. He patches things together and hopes for the best. But, when you patch up somebody like Joel Embiid with somebody like Paul George, just because it's the most liquidable, most likable, most, flashy name out there in one off season, doesn't mean you're making a big difference. You're just going for the headline. You're not going for what works well. But look, I hope that both teams will be watchable next season. But it's going to be up to management. It's going to be up to what they bring in. But speaking of management, I got to manage our time because our boy Mitch is over on Hardcore Sports Network. Already started his next show. We got to get going. But I want to say a big thank you to Joe Sullivan. You got to check out Joe Sullivan's upcoming show on Stream Punk Entertainment. Bringing back old school sports. But Joe, other than that, can you tell us a little bit about old school sports and your show and where people can find you?
Yeah, so I'm starting it's a old/new venture because I've done old school shows in the past. But I'm doing a old school on the Buddy Ryan era. So basically it's about Buddy Ryan and it's about like his impact on like me as a football fan because I'm about to be 47, and when I started watching football, the Buddy Ryan team is what made me fall in love with football. So I thought what a good time to do a show on what makes you fall in love with the Eagles. Now they're world champions. You know what I'm saying? And I'm a diehard Eagles fan, but. Obviously it's better now than it was, but the Buddy Ryan era was a lot of fun. So not quite sure when I'm going to do the show. I'm waiting on a couple guys. I'm trying to get a couple guests, but it's going to be sometime in the next few weeks.
All right.
Cool.
Sounds good. Where can people find you?
Excellent.
Yeah, and I also, on Monday nights I do a show called the Sully Squad on Out of the Box Sports. So if you know that's on modern day sports. So
Okay.
me and a few guys, me and a few of my buddies, we break down kind of what we just did here. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like modern day Philly sports. And I wrote an article on Buddy Ryan on streampunk.net. So if you want to check out the article, the article's kind of like a prelim to the show. But I'm going to be doing a lot of different topics. Like I think I want to do one on Jeffrey Lurie, like the Jeffrey Lurie era. And it's not just Philadelphia sports. I mean, I'm going to hold my nose when I say this, but I'm actually thinking about doing one on the 90s Cowboys. Now, as much as
Oh, sorry.
I almost threw up in my mouth, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But the show is obviously, I'm a Philadelphia sports fan, so it's going to be mostly Philly sports. Like I'll do one on Keenan's Flyers, the Lindros era, stuff like that. But I want to branch it out to all the different sports. So we'll do like 90s Cowboys, maybe Bills, stuff like that.
Cool.
It's interesting to me now, Joe. I got to ask because I know what James' answer is. So when you were growing up, you talked about the Buddy Ryan.
Yeah.
What was your dad? First off, do you have any like brothers?
I know. I do, but I'm a younger brother. I'm the oldest. Yeah, I have a much younger brother.
Okay, so the brother and your father, are they both Eagles fans?
Oh yeah, everybody's Eagles fan.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the interesting thing is in my household, I had an older brother and I had a father. Neither one were Philadelphia Eagles fans.
Oh wow.
Both my dad was a Washington Redskin fan and my brother was a New Orleans Saints fan.
Oh.
And
random.
Yeah, very random. And the reason why I fell in love with the Eagles, with no male influence, no influence whatsoever, just my own eyes watching the game, is it was my dad watching the Redskins versus the Eagles game, and I watched Randall Cunningham run all over his team, and my dad's like cursing and swearing at the television, saying those damn refs are missing calls. And I just see this guy as majestic as Randall was as a quarterback. And I go, who's that guy?
Mm-hmm.
And my dad's like, he's the enemy. And I'm like, oh, not to me. I'm like, he seems kind of cool. I like him.
Yeah, right.
And I just remember like practicing some of the plays outside, how Randall used to run them.
Oh wow.
And just like doing the bootlegs, the naked bootlegs, doing like practicing the footwork and the arm throw, and like how he like did the follow through with his hip hip snap. Like that was how I became an Eagles fan. So it's interesting because I really like thought about this, and I'm like, I had no influence where there was so many people that I've come across that are like, oh yeah, my dad was an Eagles fan and this and that. Like James's dad is a diehard Eagles fan.
Yeah,
and it's like there's that influence. I had none of that.
My uncle, so my grandfather has really got me into it, and of course my uncles. And my uncle had tickets in the 700 level. So like my first game I ever went to, I was 8 years old. It was like, and I'm going back. This was '86. This is a long time ago.
Wow.
Buddy's first year, and like I just remember walking up. You guys remember the vet where you had to walk up all those
all the
way up there, and got up there, and I remember being like, holy crap, like this is really cool. And then like you go to the bathroom and then you see some drunk dude pissing in the sink and all, you got an education in the 700.
Oh yeah.
And it was just, and I just loved it ever since, it's
the only influence that I guess I ever got, but it was rare because I never really saw them all that often. All my uncles were Eagles fans, especially on my mom's side. And my mom made them very angry because I was christened on the day of the Eagles Super Bowl in 1980.
Oh wow.
And
how about that?
This was, for people who don't know, this is before the Super Bowls were in the evening. This is like when they were in the afternoon. And so my mom is at the church, and this is in the 80s, and both my uncles were standing there with headphones on listening to the Eagles game in church And as there were certain things happening, they were cheering for me. My mom gave them a death stare, and
Ah,
basically, when we got back to the house, they put the Eagles game on, and like the drinking commenced and the Super Bowl party commenced. It wasn't a christening party; it was a Super Bowl party.
Right.
And my mom said, "You will always, at least you will always remember that you were christened on the day that the Eagles were in the Super Bowl." And I'm like, why would you do that to my uncles? Like after I became an Eagles fan, why would you do that to my uncles?
yeah,
And they're like,
really.
oh, they held it over my head for years.
Oh my god.
And because I mean, you got to think about it. In the '80s, like they hadn't been back to a championship game in 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was like, damn it, why? You already had a child. Why do you have to pick this day of all days? I
Yeah.
get it. It's a Sunday. Pick next Sunday. No one cares about that Sunday.
Well, I always say, I even said it this year when the Eagles were in the Super Bowl. I said it's not a Super Bowl to me; it's an Eagles game, you know. But
Yeah.
that's probably the same kind of philosophy what you guys do.
Well, we're going to wrap up for today, but I do want to thank a lot for Joe Sullivan coming on and chatting it up with
Yeah,
us.
thank you guys. I had a great time.
Yeah, man, you got it.
And you know, I want to thank James Scores and my excellent producer. I want to thank everybody who chimed in on the chat board, everyone that's watching us. Please hit that subscribe and like on the Hardcore Sports Network. Also, hit that like and subscribe on our sister network, Stream Punk Entertainment. Go check out their content. We're going to have Phillies post-game and pre-game stuff coming up in the near future. I know that the Flyers season is wrapping up. You can probably catch me and James coming up this week with some of the post games. But for Joe Marks, Joe Sullivan, and James Scores, we are the Patterson Ave Sports Show. Thank you for joining us. Have a great weekend, Philadelphia. And we're still Super Bowl champions.